In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Here I am. I'm with you.
Episode 8. Welcome back. You guys know Rick Walker oh so very well. He's going to be sitting in with us tonight. And it seems befitting for a hot July evening, you know, like the hottest July ever in 120,000 years.
20,000 years.
That means we're going to have the hottest show ever in 120,000 years tonight.
Wow.
Yeah. Look out. We've got a lot to talk about and two amazing guests that I can't wait to introduce you to. Jose and Kynan have become good friends of mine. These fellas are with the Schiller Institute, an institution that was founded a long time ago by Lyndon LaRouche, a name that might be familiar to many of you. And you're going to find out more about Lyndon LaRouche, the organization, the Schiller Institute, and what they do. But, you know, in this day and age, when everything's a viral video on the internet, most people probably know Jose from some of the viral videos he's made, doing interventions with politicians, journalists, editors, mainstream media hacks, and other corrupt public figures. But this week, he actually did an intervention with someone whom he respects, which is kind of rare and different for Jose to do that. He intervened at a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. event in New York City. He was doing an event with Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, and he was addressing the Israel question. So we're going to show you video of that, which you probably have not seen yet. And we're going to talk to Jose about why he did that, what his question was, and what, if any, answer he got from Mr. Kennedy. So without further ado, I want to bring in our guests, Jose Vega. Hi, Jose. Great
Howdy.
to see you again.
Yeah.
And Kynan Thistlethwaite, who's also with the Schiller Institute. How you doing, Kynan? Good to see you.
Doing well, Laura. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful to have you. What are you guys up to on this hot Saturday night? The hottest in 120,000 years.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's good though. Maybe we can understand what our ancestors experienced. That's why they were living in caves. You know, it's too damn hot. Going to a cave, it's dark, it's damp, it's cool. But we were actually at Lincoln Center a couple hours ago. We were distributing leaflets for our concert/rally. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Well, you guys have been going out to screenings around New York, right? Of the Oppenheimer film?
That's right.
Doing leafleting?
Yeah, kind of could tell you all about that.
Yeah,
tell me about that.
It's been a lot of fun. Well, we're trying to, as you know, promote our rally August 6th, which will be happening in front of Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza at the UN. And it's going to be the 78th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima. Then 3 days later, the bombing of Nagasaki, both of which were, as we know now, militarily unnecessary. 220,000 people died from that, mostly civilians. And the Oppenheimer film actually goes through that. So it's really prescient that this film is out now. And we could talk to people about the subject matter. And a lot of people are just totally unaware of the fact that we are on the brink of a thermonuclear war right now. Relations with Russia are at an all-time low. You have people trying to start a conflict in Taiwan. So it's terrible. And the Oppenheimer film, despite some of its flaws, you know, I don't know if you two have seen the film, maybe we could talk about it a bit, but the ending, I think, is the most important part, because Oppenheimer is talking with Einstein at Princeton, and there was a fear at the time when they were conducting the Trinity test that they would have some kind of chain reaction that would ignite the atmosphere when they tested the bomb. It turned out not to be true, thankfully. That's why we're still here. But he had said that, we still did unleash this chain reaction. We have arms races, we have nuclear proliferation, we have enough atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, to destroy the world 100 times over. And the film ends with the panning of, the globe being immersed in this nuclear war. So
what the heck? They just might set the atmosphere on fire, but let's do it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. That was basically the idea and the concept of it. And so we've been giving out leaflets in front of that theater, with people who've been going in and coming out and having these kinds of discussions with them. I had one guy, like maybe 19, 20 years old, and he took a leaflet and was like, man, that ending really hit me, man. It's like, we really are this close to just blowing ourselves up, And so I said, good. Glad that you feel that way. Here's a leaflet about a rally we've got coming up. So, yeah.
Yeah, talk about man-made climate change. That would be it.
Well, yeah, but you got to use plastic straws. I mean, you got to use paper straws. I'm sorry, that's
yeah. Well, that'll save us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, using a little paper straws that dissolve after like 3
See,
seconds.
already we're on the same page. I'm liking you guys already, and I just met you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, at the movie theaters, at the AMCs, they only give you paper straws, so you got to take like 5 of them.
Yeah, it's bad for slushies.
Yeah, really bad for slushies.
Jesus. Oh, it is a strange world.
But yeah.
Well, I take my hat off to you guys. I salute you for doing what you're doing. It's important to raise awareness. I mean, what issue is bigger than this? Nuclear annihilation, and we are closer now than we have ever been to that in history. So yeah, this is the issue. While everybody else is running around worried about like paper straws, this is the issue of the day.
Well, exactly. Did you see this intervention that this young woman did, 21-year-old, who like stood up to KJP, Kynan Jean-Pierre?
Mm-hmm. I did see that.
No, I didn't see that.
All right.
That looked so staged.
It was very staged.
It was.
I'll describe it to you, Rick, first before I tell you who these people were. So Kynan Jean-Pierre, press secretary for the White House, is talking to an audience of like people who are in their late teens, early 20s about how they're the voters of tomorrow. And then you just see this one woman stand up who's 21 years old, and she's like, go, oh boy, here I go. And she stands up, and then she says, will Biden stop signing all of these projects that are killing the environment? I mean, he's signed more projects than Donald Trump has, And she goes on like that for like another 20 seconds. And then Kynan Jean-Pierre says, well, first of all, thank you for your courage.
Thank you for your courage.
And then everybody claps.
Unbelievable.
And then it turns out that the young woman who stood up to do this for the climate is the executive director of an organization called Gen Z for Change, which used to be known as TikTokers for Biden. And this organization has our stakeholders in the Biden administration. So, totally real, totally genuine, organic, right? Yeah. There's my intervention. But
if that had been a real intervention, like the kind that you do, they would have thrown you out. They would have thrown her out.
Oh, no
real
doubt.
Quick.
Or if it was if it was
like this.
Yeah.
I'll show you what I mean. This is what happens when you do a real intervention.
Oh, is this the lecture hall with Seymour Hersh? I'm looking for the one with Seymour Hersh because it's a policy and press hall event. So shouldn't we be talking about the Nord Stream since that's the biggest story of the century? And you guys, I'm sorry. I mean, you have the executive editor of the New York Times there who came out with a phony story to try and block Seymour Hersh. It's just kind of funny how that happened, I mean, did you even acknowledge Seymour Hersh? All of you are executive editors of papers that broke Pentagon, My Lai, Watergate. Is this the same papers or not? I mean, is there anything you've gotten right in the last 20 years, or am I mistaken about that? I mean, it's just kind of funny because Iraq, wrong. Syria, wrong. Russiagate, really wrong. Okay, I mean, the list goes on and on. So the last thing you could do to try and actually fix your reputation is acknowledge that through leaks, we had to find out that Zelensky was going to bomb Moscow on the anniversary. I mean, if you're so impartial, shouldn't you at least say, right, that Zelensky was going to bring us on the verge of World War III? That seems pretty fair. While Julian Assange rots in prison, all of you got, fat checks because he's in jail for doing your job. And you know what? Tucker Carlson ain't no Seymour Hersh, but he did something you guys are scared to do. Speak the truth and actually be critical of the war, which is why he was actually fired from Fox, because you are all cowards, every single one of you. None of you have actually had any relevancy. And you know what? The mainstream press is now dying. Nobody's ever going to listen to you again. You have no credibility with the public. The only people who care about what you have to say are elite assholes who have nothing productive to say anymore. And it's dying off. So will you at least say something, either about Nord Stream or Ukraine or the fact that Zelensky brought us to the verge of World War III, and the only reason we knew about that was through leaks? Go ahead. It's a free speech event, right? You guys are the press. Let's say something here. Mr. Khan, come on. You're the executive editor of the New York Times, I'm just trying to get into some good trouble here, man. Woo, listen, Karen, get out of my face for a second. I got to talk to these gentlemen. Well, I just want to hear what they have to say. Go ahead. I'm done.
Wait your turn.
You're not going to tell them to you. Go.
Wait your turn.
You could project if we can.
I would just say I think it's important to hear everybody's point of view.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right.
I do think that we need to give our moderator a chance to ask other questions.
We're on the verge of World War III.
Let's go. Really,
Let's go. Say something about this bombing. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Listen, don't stand there while there are people rotting in prison. Nobody said anything about Uhuru, right? The socialists who are in jail for being critical of this war. God damn it. Let's go. At least say something about the people in jail for being critical of this war. They don't deserve to be in prison right now.
Yeah, good times.
How's your knee, Jose? Is your knee okay after that?
It clicks every time I bend it. That was a good time.
They put the slam dunk on you there.
Yeah, I know.
How did you know her name was Karen?
You can usually tell by the way they act. There, it's a pretty universal, name there. The height of that one was when Aaron Mate showed that to Seymour Hersh on Jimmy Dore, and Seymour Hersh said, "Yeah, I saw it." And in typical Seymour Hersh fashion, I think he went on a little too long, but he got the point across. It was very good, So. Yeah.
Now you've made so many of these. Tell me about just some of the other politicians that you've intervened with. If our audience is unfamiliar, tell them who you've interrupted.
Okay, so it goes back to, I guess, I recently learned that there is a word for this. I think it's a Kenyan word. They call it mau-mauing or something. And it's this idea where you just go and interrupt the town hall. So the first time I did it was 2019, like November, on Adriano Espaillat, Congressman of Harlem. And then I got kind of like on headline news when I interrupted Kamala Harris back in 2021. And then after her, Senator Gillibrand. And then after her, Congressman Jamal Bowman. And then the one that like really got us on the ways, that Kynan and I got us on the ways, was the one with the AOC intervention, the one that Kynan opened up with, where he mistakenly says, "None of this matters."
No, you can't say that. You can't say that.
Unless there's a nuclear weapon, which he meant to say something else. He meant to say, "None of this matters if there's a nuclear bomb coming our way." because they were just talking about, what were they talking about? Kind of just some bullshit political.
Just
I don't even
stuff.
remember. I don't even remember. That's how meaningless
Mailboxes
it was.
or something.
Nothing of substance.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing of substance.
Well, you know, one of the coolest things that you guys do, and I love how you stage these interventions where several people are there from the Schiller Institute, and you've all worked it out amongst yourselves where one stands up and confronts them, and then just as security takes the first one out, then somebody else stands up and starts yelling at him, and so on and so on and so on until, you know, they have to go through 5 or 6 people. And do you always get thrown out of the venue? Usually they just ask you to leave. They're not as rude to you as they were at that video we just looked at. But it's usually just one of those things where they ask you to leave and you go quietly, maybe not quietly, but voluntarily.
Well, I believe in not going gentle into that good night, but kind of can.
That's right.
answer this one.
Well, I think most of the time we've been, because we really don't let up when we do these things. I mean, if they ask us to
Right.
stop, we're just gonna keep on yelling. So, yeah, we've been forcefully removed quite a lot of times. Sometimes, you know, like you saw with Jose, you get pushed. So, yeah. But I wanted to say something else. I mean, these interventions go back, you know, way before we did them. There's some Canadian friends of ours, Yves Engler and Dimitri Lascaris, who have been doing similar kinds of interventions in Canada that have been very successful. But, you know, back to the heyday of the LaRouche movement in the 70s, the way we would recruit people, since we were small at the time, we just go and do interventions, and we talk to people after the event. But one of my favorite ones that our chairwoman, Helga, has recounted to us is when she went to an event that, I'm forgetting her name. Jose, you remember that woman? The one that had the cane? Well, anyway, she was like this rabid
Was it Ayn
environmentalist.
Rand by any chance? Was
Not
it
a-
Ayn Rand?
No.
Margaret Mead.
Yeah.
Margaret Mead.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Margaret Mead. I
Yes.
haven't thought of her in a long time.
She was super old at the time. And she had a cane. She had like this cane with ISIS on it, not the terrorist organization, but the god.
Yeah.
The god ISIS. So Helga, she's this, very pretty lady, the moderator.
When was this? Back in the 70s, right?
It's back in the 70s. She's very young and pretty, moderated. She was like, oh, go ahead, ask a question. And then she basically just derails the whole thing, talking about what Mead and these environmentalists are pushing is genocide. They want to deindustrialize the world. They want to reduce population, all in the name of climate change. And Mead got so upset with her and she's like old at this time, she gets out of her chair and she starts chasing Helga around the room with her cane, like trying to swipe at her. So
Yeah.
So sometimes that's how it goes,
How old were you in the 1970s?
He was still floating around.
Kynan's a young one. Kynan's only 21, right? Aren't you just 21,
Yeah.
Kynan? Yeah,
Yeah.
Impressive. And Jose, you're what, in your 30s?
So is there video of the event you're talking about?
Wait, do you
out
actually
there?
think I'm in my 30s? Is that a compliment or no?
Yeah, well, you seem so wise for your years. I'm backpedaling now. 24?
Yeah.
24.
Okay, well, to be fair, I'll be
Goodness.
25 in September, so.
Feel old yet, Rick?
Oh, let's change the subject.
Yeah, let's
Why don't you guys tell us what your movement is about, the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche movement? I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I'm here to learn, so share.
Jose, why don't you start?
Oh, boy.
He's more experienced than I am.
I have to give a whole pitch meeting now about well, I guess I can more talk about what recruited me around the organization. When I was in high school, I went to high school at a place called Manhattan Hunter Science High School, and that was located on 66th Street in Amsterdam for people who know New York City. It was basically mid-Manhattan on the west side. And after school, I would see tables that said LaRouche on them, and then they would have Obama with a Hitler stash on it. So this was like 2000, and this was like 2014, 2015, and I used to
I
like
remember
heckle the
those
guys.
posters. Yeah, I
yeah.
remember those posters. They were very powerful.
It was so powerful. I got inducted into the Library of Congress. So,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
so the poster, I would heckle sometimes the table people and not even think twice about it. And then I just came to one of their meetings one day because I was invited because I knew one of the organizers that I had no idea he was attached with the organization. And so he invited me to come to one of their town halls on Saturday. When I got there, I realized, like, whoa, these people know way, way more than I thought I did know about, like, geopolitics, about politics in general, about culture, philosophy, just everything, right? When you're like 15 years old, you think you know everything. Um, it's just the perks of being a teenager, I guess, naivete. And so
Uh,
it was good. It was like a challenge to kind of come in there every Saturday and try and not fall asleep or try and not, like, actually or try to keep up, and slowly, like, I was realizing that, wait a minute, these guys are actually right about things. They're actually making a lot of sense when it comes to understanding how things work in the world and in politics. And one of the first major campaigns that I was really involved with was the Russiagate stuff, because we had gotten William Binney to speak live. I think this was in 2017 or 2018 when we got William Binney to speak live at the Beacon Theater, I think, or it was at
mm.
the 92nd, no, the Leonard Nimoy Theater on the 96th Street Theater, Manhattan. We got him to speak live with Ray McGovern, Kirk Wiebe, and somebody else from the VIPs, the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And they gave, like, a scorching town hall on why the Russian hack didn't happen. And this was 2017. It was recorded, and then it was the first time that I was attacked on Twitter by what was her name? Louis Mensch, I think that's her
Oh
name.
no, Louise Mensch, craziest lady on Twitter.
That was like the first time
She's
I
had
was
me
like,
blocked for years.
yeah, that was the first time that I was like, no way, like I did something that got a reaction on Twitter. Wow. And I think ultimately that's more of a personal anecdote of how I got in. I think what really, really inspired me was the fact that it's not a pessimistic organization. It's that people are inherently beautiful, are inherently capable of intelligence and creativity, and that you can teach intelligence. It's not something you're born with. Everybody who's a human being has the ability to be intelligent. Thus, the Plato and Aristotle painting in the back of my background right here, because Plato believed that every single human being is born inherently with creative knowledge to understand any problem thrown their way. Whereas Aristotle believed that some people were born to be slaves and other people were born to be rulers and masters. And that, tough luck if you were just a slave. And the world has pretty much been divided by these two philosophies ever since. That's kind of like what Lyndon LaRouche has talked about, is that, the oligarchy, when people say they rule the world, he always, calls out who they are. And they are very big Aristotelians. They don't believe that all people are capable of intelligence. They don't believe that all people are capable of creativity. And they don't believe that man is created in the image of God. They believe that man is like an animal. And that's all we are. We're just our senses. We are just what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we feel, what we smell. And that's all we are, and that's all we can be reduced to. But Plato believed we are more. And so the LaRouche organization's goal and method is to say, now, how do you bring that to policy exactly? How do you bring that concept that every person is capable of creative genius and every single human being has dignity? How do you dictate policy around that idea? And how do you dictate policy that can best foster the environment for every child to grow up with the best education possible and the best resources so that they can then make their own countries or neighborhoods beautiful, right? So the best way to do that is through physical economy, which is something that Lyndon LaRouche was an expert in. He was a physical economist. There's another thing that we go after Adam Smith. We don't think Adam Smith he was not an American founding father. A lot of people have that misconception because he wrote Wealth of Nations around 1776. Lyndon LaRouche based his economic principles around Alexander Hamilton, Henry Carey, who was the economic advisor to Lincoln, and FDR, and what FDR did to actually rebuild the country post Great Depression, really post Woodrow Wilson with the invention of the Fed. So, these principles of economic development is that the economy should not be measured based on a monetary value or like what the value of the dollar is. It should be measured on how healthy are people, how educated are people, and how efficient are people, right? And are the people making things that make themselves more efficient in the future more efficient? So,
You know who else said
on.
that?
Oh.
Well, you're probably not old enough to remember, but those are the words that Robert F. Kennedy said the night he was killed in his final speech in 1968, where he talked about how, the country shouldn't measure its greatness by its GDP, but by the quality of life of its citizens, or something along those lines. Yeah.
Wow.
Same thing. Same thing.
That's why, we're with Kennedy, we're with FDR, and we are Kynan. Did I miss anything?
No, but I just wanted to talk about how I came in. I actually I was too young to be political, but I came in when I was 16. The organization was having a summer program in a church on the West Village in New York City. And my English teacher, who I had really liked, his classes were great, made me want to go to school and not, just sleep in class. He had told me to, he invited me to the summer program, and I went in it, and it was about 30 kids, I think. Jose was there too, but they had taught us how to sing. We sang the pieces of Bach, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, and all of the great classical composers. And after we would sing, we would also do science, things that people take for granted today, like how do we measure the Earth's circumference, right? How do we know that the Earth is curved and not just flat, right? Things that you can't really tell with just your senses. We would figure that out. We would read Johannes Kepler, the person who figured out that the orbits of the solar system were elliptical, not circular. We had read that, and we did many other things. So I came through that. I came through an intellectual background, and then I got more involved with the political stuff. But I saw that they wanted this kind of education for everyone. They believed that every human being was made in the image of God. That this universal education should be taught everywhere, and that we really have to foster that, through promoting creativity. Like you said, like RFK said in that speech, GDP is not an appropriate measure for economic growth. It's how well educated your citizenry is, the lack of poverty, what if they're living, the infrastructure, good sanitation, good healthcare, things like that. That's the true measure of economic growth. And we see that, for example, in other parts of the world with the BRICS Plus, China, they've just taken out over 800 million people out of poverty. And they're working with other nations through the Belt and Road Initiative, building high-speed rail transportation systems in poor nations. That's what the Schiller Institute's mission was, to promote the development of all nations, peace through economic development. So,
well, we can't have that. I'm sure that was very upsetting to certain people in the United States government who persecuted and prosecuted Lyndon LaRouche. Can you tell me a little bit, or tell our viewers who might not be familiar with the U.S. government's long campaign to discredit, slander, prosecute, and make the LaRouche's lives hell?
Sure.
Well, before we go, Kai, I would just say, if you ever really want to know more about this, Lori, like, we can get you Dennis Small, who went to jail with Lyndon LaRouche. Mike Billington, another associate, got like 90 years or something.
What?
For a nonviolent offense, right? So, and he only served like, I think, was it 10 years or so? How many years did Mike Billington end up serving, Kynan?
Yeah, I think around 10 years, but he was originally given a 70-year sentence or something. Yeah, and luckily they shortened it, but that's how ridiculous it was.
What were the charges? What the heck was he charged with to get a sentence like that?
Conspiracy to commit wire fraud.
Oh, wow.
So for people who don't know, it's not that they committed the crime, it's that they had a conspiracy to commit the crime. That's what a conspiracy charge is, right? So,
but Ghislaine Maxwell only got 40 years. Ghislaine Maxwell got, I think, less than 40 years for doing what she did.
Yeah, right. So you think about that. It's like, yeah, and then Mike Billington got 70 years for supposedly, this isn't true, but supposedly scamming old ladies out of money or something. So, that should tell you right there that the charges were trumped up. Basically, go ahead, Kynan. You were going to talk about it first.
Well, the thing to understand about what Lyndon LaRouche was doing at the time, there was something very particular. Lyndon, he was organizing the country around what later became the Strategic Defense Initiative when Ronald Reagan gave a speech in March, the middle of March in 1983, where he announced that we would make nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete. And the way we would do that is through a crash program to produce laser beam technologies, beam weapons that would be constructed outside the planet. And
yeah, Space Force. We called it Star Wars back then.
Star Wars. Yeah.
SDI.
That's what it was. So Reagan, he had many discussions with Reagan. He was involved with his National Security Council, and this became national policy. And there were people like Henry Kissinger, other not so friendly people, and I don't know if you saw that, but Henry Kissinger just met Xi Jinping recently. 100 years old. That's pretty
amazing.
Crazy to me.
I know. And he just keeps on going, Henry. What are they giving him? Is he taking adrenochrome or something? Oh my God. He's 100 years old, still ticking.
Yeah. But so unfortunately, the Soviets did not accept this offer of cooperation. And by the way, I think had we developed it, you would not have this threat of nuclear war today, and it was also meant as an economic development program because these beam technologies, laser beams, which would be put in the commercial economy, for manufacturing, processing, and things like that. Lynn wanted to export them to places in Africa, and Dennis Speed knows a lot about this. There was a rally that we had organized in Washington, D.C., and people, you had people carrying beam, signs that said "Beam the bomb," send this technology to Africa. But because he had intervened in that way, he had basically made an enemy of all the intelligence agencies and all these, really disgusting people within the Reagan administration. So they jailed him because of that.
I remember all of that. I've been doing news a long time, and I was covering the Reagan administration back in the 80s. I remember Star Wars, covered that all the time, and I definitely do remember the prosecution and slander of Lyndon LaRouche. And so I too was kind of brainwashed. I was told that he was someone who was bad, who was to be feared and not to be listened to or taken seriously. And it wasn't until about a decade later that I saw some of his lectures on my local public access cable TV station. Because in the days before the internet, like in the early 90s, that was the only place you could find alternative media, alternative truth, alternative, whatever you want to call it. And, nobody else was going to put Lyndon on TV. So LaRouche back then had his own TV production facility. I don't know if you guys know this or have watched some of his old shows, but, he basically created his own media empire and was sending these tapes out to public access stations all across America. I don't know if they were doing that in Canada too, or if Rick saw any of those back in the day, but, they were on all the time. And I'll be damned if I didn't start listening to the guy. And so much of what he said, I found myself agreeing with. A lot of this made a lot of sense and aligned with my own views. And I said, he doesn't sound crazy to me. Why does the media say that this man is dangerous? Why do they say he's crazy? And of course, now many years have passed and I've matured and kind of figured things out that pretty much whoever the media tells you is crazy is someone you should listen to.
Probably didn't help that he accused Kissinger of being a pedophile.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Oh,
that's my favorite Lyndon LaRouche quote ever. I don't know what words we can or cannot say. Are we on YouTube?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so then I won't say something that'll get us banned. But he was on, what was the name of that show? Crossfire? I think that was the name of the show. So Lyndon LaRouche was on Crossfire, and then the host says, "I'd like to quote you from your own paper. Here you say, Henry Kissinger. One does not need to know that Henry Kissinger is of the, the F word for, gay people, to know that he sleeps with boys at the Carlisle Hotel." And then the host turns to Lyndon LaRouche and says, "This is our, Secretary of State you're talking about." And Lyndon LaRouche is just laughing. And then, I think the host says something like, "I'm glad you find this funny. He happens to be a personal friend of mine." and LaRouche says, "Well, you should maybe reckon with the fact that everything you just read is true." And actually, to follow up on that Kissinger thing, there is a story where I think it was Henry Kissinger's wife, Nancy, right? Is her name Nancy? So one of something like that. But if you Google a Google keyword from the story, it's a real story. One of our organizers ran into Kissinger at the airport with his wife, and the organizer was very respectful to Mr. Kissinger. "Could I ask you a few questions? It'll be quick. I know you're in a rush." And Henry Kissinger said, "Okay, sure, no problem. I'll take a few questions." And the first two questions were pretty normal, something like, why are you, with China and stuff and Africa. And then finally the organizer says, "Can I ask you one more question?" And Kissinger says, "Okay. How do you like your boys at the Carlisle Hotel?" And then and then his wife just starts chasing our organizer around the airport and actually assaults her. And before the police come, they escort Henry Kissinger and his wife out, and they took this to court. So it's on the record that Nancy Kissinger beat up one of our organizers, but it was declared to be a mistrial or something because she said, "Well, they triggered my anxiety that I'm diagnosed with, so I had to react that way involuntarily." Whatever. People in power can get away with whatever they want. So it's a real story. Yeah.
I see your cat has decided to join us. What's Kitty's name?
That's Ozymandias, although he's got a mind of his own. Sometimes he wants cuddles and then he doesn't. So
he just wants your attention. Well, speaking of people that they tell us are crazy and we shouldn't be listening to, all of us here on Strange Bedfellows, I think, I'm not sure about Rick. He's Canadian anyway, so he can't vote. But I think we all support Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or at least we all did until his recent pivot on the Israel-Palestine question. And I don't know if that's changed how you guys feel about him. I know you were both very enthusiastic about him until he took this hard stance on Israel. And, I'm hearing this every day from many of my friends on the left who say, "I love Kennedy, but his stance on Israel is a deal breaker for me. It's that one issue that they will not compromise on." So I was going to ask you guys how you feel about that.
You want to go first, Kynan?
Sure.
Just before you go, if you just type in Nancy Kissinger, LaRouche, it's the first thing that comes up in Washington Post. But anyway, go on, Kynan.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, I'll just preface it by saying I disagree with maybe 60% of what RFK says, minimally. On the environmental stuff, I really disagree with them on that. Israeli-Palestine, hugely disagree with him. But I think RFK represents a kind of people I don't think are seeing him correctly. It's not about the particular beliefs or issues that he talks about, which makes him so potent as a candidate, but he's coming out of this legacy of having his uncle, his father, and Ted. I don't know what Ted Kennedy's relation to him was, but he also, he was killed
It's his
as
uncle.
his uncle. Yeah, as
Mhm.
you had talked about on our previous show, he's coming out of that. And the United States still hasn't reckoned with the fact that the assassination files, they've never been released. So we don't know anything about what really took place. So he's going into that, and he always talks about the American University speech, which is, I think, the most important speech of that any president has really given in the past 60 years in politics, where he's saying, we need to put our foot in the shoes of our adversary. He talked about 1 out of every 7 Russians being killed in World War II. And that was a shock to the US back in the day when you had, things like, what was that? Oh, Combat, being released, like, oh, how the Americans were the ones that single-handedly defeated the Nazis. But Kennedy, sought this sense of understanding in the American public with the Soviets. And Khrushchev actually let that speech be transmitted in the nation. And also,
and it was published on the front page of Pravda. Yeah.
Right.
Which is very rare for any American president or politician's words to, make it into the Iron Curtain. But that speech was broadcast on Radio Moscow, and it was published on the front page of Pravda.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Which didn't go over well back home for Kennedy. It was a political disaster for Kennedy. Next thing you know, his political opponents were calling President Kennedy a communist, which led to a lot of the backlash coming at him from the right when he went to Dallas. And, the day that Kennedy arrived in Dallas, the Dallas Morning News had a huge full-page ad accusing Kennedy of being a communist, saying, "Welcome to Dallas, Mr. Kennedy. You should be held to account for your loyalties to Russia and not the American people. You are a Soviet agent, a Russian agent." That's the same charges they're leveling at RFK Jr. right now. That's what they're saying about him too.
Right. And that's important you bring that up, because I would add that the context of him having met Rabbi Shmuley in this public forum, and the discussion was pretty bad. I'll just say that. But, you had Congresswoman Schultz, I think her name was, at the hearings. And she's also disgraced because the WikiLeaks files, had shown that she had favored Hillary over Bernie, and that she was leading the charge to sabotage Bernie's campaign. So she's, utterly disgraced for that. But she had falsely labeled RFK as an anti-Semite. She had totally miscontextualized, what he was saying, which had nothing to do with COVID-19, by the way, but about the totalitarian surveillance measures that are being enforced right now, that Snowden has revealed, etc. So I think, that's an important reason for why RFK would show up with someone like this. Maybe they had some relationship in the past. But that's my view of him. I think what he's doing by evoking the spirit, the ghost of his uncle and of his father, is absolutely needed now and will be potent and really reshaping American politics today. So I disagree with him on a lot, but on that, I'm totally down to support him.
Well,
what do you think, Jose?
I do agree with what Kynan said. I think what's important is the fact that you have a dialogue. I think, I don't know if you have the video. We'll play it at some point of what Kynan.
I do.
Good. Okay, great. Well, then just to kind of set up why it was so important, what Kynan did is that he actually initiated a dialogue between himself, which Kynan is only 22 years old, and then Kennedy, who, he's what, it's like in his 70s, like 72 or something, or
69,
He
right?
is 69 years old.
Okay, what a great age to be. And he, so Robert Kennedy is part of one of the biggest American dynasties, right? That's a Kennedy, right? And he understands the history. He knows the history of his family. He knows the importance of the legacy. Clearly, I mean, he gave that speech on June 20th, right? You need to have
Great
a
speech.
relationship. Yeah, you need to have a dialogue. Yeah, I think I provided the live stream for you to actually watch it.
That's right. Yes, you did.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. That was
And because he has such a strong anti-war message, and he's always been consistently anti-war his entire political life, the many people, including myself, are trying to square this with his unbending, unyielding support for Israel and all of the money and the weapons that we give Israel. And, Bobby, when he was trying to knock down these false allegations that he's some kind of anti-Semite, which he certainly is not, this week he held an event with Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, famous rabbi, at his, I think it's called the World Values Foundation or something like that in New York City. And of course, you're there in New York City, and you're a guy who does interventions, and you had some questions. So you showed up. You and Kynan both came out, and I'd like to show you a little video of that and show you guys what happened. Now, the video I'm going to show you, I'll show you a couple of different angles. Because what we're looking at here is the official live stream that the Kennedy campaign was broadcasting live, and they only had one camera trained on the stage, but there's no microphone or camera out in the audience. So you'll hear Jose, but it's a little garbled. It's hard to understand his question, but I'll play this for you so that you can see the response that Jose got from both Kennedy and from the rabbi. Take a look.
Okay. Bobby, what was the last week and a half like for you?
It had its ups and downs. Listen, I have a thick skin. I've been involved in controversial issues for most of my career, and usually stuff, even vitriol and poison, does not affect me very much. Or it really doesn't affect me at all. My wife actually complains about that, but the charge of anti-Semitism is one that cuts me, and it hurts me. It hurts Cheryl. It hurts our family, and so that was painful. But I also, when I was sitting in front of the committee and seeing the people who were making that charge against me, my attitude toward them was not hatred or anger. I don't know why they made those charges. I don't believe they believe that I'm an anti-Semite. I've literally never said an anti-Semitic word in my life. But I believe that they probably think what they were doing was right in one way or another. And I think we all have this capacity for self-delusion, to judge ourselves on our intentions rather than our actions. And I think if we're going to really heal the divide between Americans, which is one of the things that I'm trying to do with this campaign, is we can't react even to hatred with hatred. We have to react with forgiveness. We have to react with kindness and generosity. If you harbor resentments, it's like swallowing poison and hoping someone else will die. It corrodes our own souls. So I think for me, my reaction was appropriate, I think, which is to say that that's not true. and to try to have my say, but to not react, as you pointed out, with vitriol in return.
Well,
Wait for it.
but help me understand. Thank you. When you run for president, we're going to have you up here. But right now he is, so let him speak. Thank you very much. No. He is running for president. We will have questions at the end. We will. We're going to have questions at the end. And if you're quiet now, I'll choose you first, okay? If you're silent now, I'll give you the first question. If you're not, I asked, why is this night so different than all other nights? It turns out I had no idea. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Watch
Thank you.
Kennedy's face.
Thank you.
What did he say there?
Bobby, help me. Thank you for your apology, but thank you. Okay. Bobby, help me
What did Bobby
so-
say there, actually? Like, he says one comment or something to me. I didn't hear that.
I think when you were asking him to take the flyer about the Humanity for Peace rally on August 6th, he said, yes, I'll accept that. He said, okay.
Okay.
And I was watching his face. His expressions tell you a lot. I know him, so I kind of know how to read him, I think. And he wasn't, I think he recognized you, Jose. I think he's seen
Lori,
your other videos.
I really appreciate you showing me that angle. And I was kind of, after and Kynan could talk about it, I was like, really like, man, like, was that worth it? Because I was given some false intel now that I know that there was not going to be a Q&A. And so I thought, okay, well, so
This
thought,
is my
all
only
right.
chance, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. I was like, shoot, I mean, I guess if this is the only chance, then, how do you do an intervention on somebody you kind of respect? And at that point in the room, 2 other people had already intervened. So the tension was kind of there and people weren't really in the mood for another interruption. So it was really difficult, but.
Well, wait, you mean there'd been interruptions before that? Because that's at the very start when he sits down and begins with Kennedy.
Yeah, during Rabbi Shmuley's 20-minute introduction of Kennedy.
Oh, he did that long introduction. Yeah. Okay.
During his 20-minute introduction, Rabbi Shmuley goes, Rabbi Shmuley sucks. I mean, but there was a really offensive part, which, like, Lori, I know you're gonna immediately pounce on the error, but Rabbi Shmuley was saying, Robert Kennedy Sr. was one of the greatest patriots of this country who had such a big heart and love for what? For Israel. And what was the price he paid for that love? Death. By who? A Palestinian. Sirhan, killed this man's father, all because he loved Israel. I know, and you probably know better than I do, that Bobby Kennedy has gone on the record saying he doesn't think that Sirhan killed his father, that he was a patsy at least.
Exactly. And yet Bobby held his tongue. He did not correct Rabbi Shmuley on that. And that's kind of interesting that he didn't, because he certainly does not believe that Sirhan killed his father.
Wow.
He's visited Sirhan in prison.
Right.
He advocated for his release when he was up for parole before the California Parole Board. But he held his tongue on that. I thought that was
I would have too. He has to be pragmatic as a politician right now. And I don't think he wants to have the attention focused on that. He wanted to focus on the issues. If he had spoken up and made a thing out of it, that would have been the headline. That's what everyone would remember. So he's a smart guy. He has to let a lot of people say a lot of things that maybe he doesn't agree with. Just let some stuff slide so that he can get to the more important things. That's my take on it. And you're going to see a lot of that. That's part of the political game. And when you're running for president, you need to pick your battles, right?
And certainly be careful if you're going to, go against Israel. You're not going to get elected dog catcher.
Right.
Am I right?
Right.
I mean, the Israel lobby is so powerful and owns the Democratic Party, owns the Republican Party too. But in this event this week, I mean, Kennedy out-Trumped Trump. He went all in on Israel, like even deeper than Trump ever dared to go. And I personally have never seen, as much as Donald Trump, plays up to the Israel lobby, I've never seen Trump give a hour and a half long dissertation explaining the whole history of it, why he feels the way he feels, and really explaining his position the way that Kennedy did at this event this week. So even though I disagree with him, I have to hand it to him on that. He was willing to come and defend his position, explain his position. And I didn't agree with a lot of what he said, but he came in and he took the fire and he took the interventions, the interruptions. He was polite, he was kind. And I want to show you guys another angle. Hopefully you'll be able to understand what Jose actually said from this angle. This one is out in the crowd, so we can get a better idea of what actually happened there. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I support your message for peace, and I appreciate you being here. As a supporter, no, please. I respect you for calling for the message of your uncle. The message for peace are for Israel. And look, thank you. Again, Mr. Kennedy, I respect the message. We're having a rally on August 6th for peace, and we need you to help enforce it. I support everything happening here. But Mr. Kennedy, please, this is the only way I can get a message to you. Will you at least take the leaflet? It's a peace leaflet. That's all it is. Raising up is speaking. Scott Ritter is speaking. Can you just take this? Can someone grab this from your team? That's all I want. That's it. Thank you. I apologize. I just wanted to... Hold on.
Get rid of him.
I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to say I support the message. Peace.
Thank you. Bobby, help me understand. Please help me understand.
Well, at least his security was nice to you. They didn't rough you up or knock you down or call the cops on you.
Well, actually, as I was being escorted out, the security guy said, "You saved yourself. You saved yourself." I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but,
I don't know what he meant by that either. It's a strange thing to say. Saved yourself
I guess
from what?
because I said, I'm sorry or something, It was tough to try and get the attention of the crowd, because that's why I said, I'm a supporter. I wouldn't say that in public. Like right now, I would not call myself an RFK Jr. supporter. I'm not endorsing any candidate right now. I'm with what Kynan said. Kynan put it out very clearly why we are going up to bat for RFK. I guess we'll put it that way. But right now I'm not endorsing any candidates for president. Right now I'm very focused on the citizenry and mobilizing the citizenry. But that being said, the reason I said I'm a supporter is because I was hoping the crowd wouldn't be as rude as they were. But again, there were two other interventions before mine. So that's why they were, yeah.
Right. And here in a little while, as we go through, I'm going to show you a few excerpts from this event because it got pretty heated at times. And we're going to get to Kynan's question also. See, you guys didn't know when you went in there that there was actually going to be a Q&A period at the end. So that's why you interrupted. I wanted to make that clear to our viewers. Jose was not being unduly rude. He just didn't know that there actually would be a Q&A session at the end. He interrupted at the beginning. Kynan waited until the end and was actually able to ask Mr. Kennedy a question, and Kennedy just warmed right up to him, really loved his question. So I'll play that for you later and let you guys see what he actually had to say. But I wanted to ask you this, Jose. Compared to other events that you've done interventions at with politicians, in terms of how the audience responded to you. I mean, I did hear people there at the Kennedy event saying, shut him up, get him out of here. But I didn't hear it as loud and insistent as I've heard at other events you've interrupted, say by AOC, where people are really hostile to you and most of the audience cheers and claps when security drags you out. It's just obvious that they hate you at those events, but I didn't sense that hate coming at you from the Kennedy audience. And I was wondering am I right? Am I wrong? Did you
No,
get a
you're
lot of
complete.
hostility?
Actually, no, you hit the nail on the head, and I'll tell you why, and then Kynan will follow up with an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, please.
So the people in my immediate radius who could hear me, once I was being escorted out, I had people ask me like, "Oh, do you have more leaflets? I'd like to come." Sure.
See?
The people who couldn't hear me were being rude because they thought I was because somebody called Rabbi Shmuley an asshole. That's what happened before I got up. And like as much as I agree with the sentiment, you just don't call somebody an asshole, in the middle of their thing. Like that was really just uncalled for and disrespectful.
Unless it's the editor of the New York Times, then it's okay.
Yeah. Well,
you did call him an asshole.
Okay.
And I loved it.
You pick your battles, but anyway.
That's
but I had left my backpack there with Kynan. So as I was, towards the back to the people who couldn't hear me, they were like, "Yeah, get out of here, you anti-Semite." They just didn't know. They didn't know. They thought I was there to interrupt and, call Rabbi Shmuley out. That's not at all what it was. So, but then Kynan, why don't you tell them the story of what happened?
I think I told this to you, Lori. There was a woman that was 2 seats next to us on the left. And as Jose was getting escorted out, her husband actually was interested in what Jose was promoting. He wanted a flyer for the rally, and I reached in Jose's bag to get it. I grabbed the flyer, and then all of a sudden, his wife, right to his left, just takes it and just rips it up violently. And I'm like, and we just look at each other like, geez, damn. And she like really doesn't like him. And unfortunately,
really doesn't like peace, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, peace. This is bad. Humanity for peace? Nah, that must be ripped up. I hate that. That's something that I wanted to let you know that I've put in a good word through my channels for what it's worth with Mr. Kennedy. I actually think your event next weekend is right up his alley. It's just the sort of thing that people who support Kennedy would naturally support. It's a, anti-nuclear war rally. It's a remembrance for the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I know that if Kennedy had known what you were talking about, and now he does because he does have the flyer, that he would approve, that he would agree, and maybe even endorse it if he's not busy next weekend. Who knows? Maybe he'll show up in New York. I hope he does come out to Das Hammarskjöld Plaza at the UN and join you, because this is the sort of thing that's right up his alley. But then we have to square that with his unbending support for Israel, which had a lot of people scratching their heads this week. And I would like to show you, because many of you may have missed this event. And considering all of the attacks on Kennedy that we've seen over the past week since he testified in Congress and was attacked at that House Judiciary Committee hearing, they're calling him an anti-Semite. They're literally calling him Hitler in the Twitterverse, they're calling him literally Hitler now, that he's some kind of white supremacist Nazi character, and it just doesn't make any sense. So to be fair to Mr. Kennedy, even though I disagree with him, I'm going to play you a clip here from the event with Rabbi Shmuley, where he explains his support for Israel and why he feels the way that he does. Some people might say, oh, these are, AIPAC talking points, or Rabbi Shmuley's putting words in his mouth. But honestly, folks, I don't think so. This is a sincerely held belief for Mr. Kennedy. And when you see the passion that he exhibits, explaining his position, and he has felt this way all of his life, it is true. The Kennedy family have long been friends and supporters of Israel since the creation of Israel in 1948. Both his father and his uncle have been strong supporters of Israel. So I want to make sure that we're fair and that we let Bobby speak for himself now.
Israel is unique in the Mideast for saying we're only going to attack military targets. And they're very, very disciplined about doing so. Palestine, the Palestinian Authority, in contrast, follows a long tradition of deliberately targeting civilians. So anybody, and not only that, but they have a pay-to-slay policy That is the official policy of the Palestinian Authority. If you kill a Jew, not a member of the IDF, if you kill any Jew, you are going to get awarded with pay for life. And if you go to jail or you're killed, your family will get payments for life. And the official policy of Hamas is the genocide of all the Jews. So they consider, and this, by the way, in 1948, when Israel was attacked at its birth, the plans were captured of Syria and Egypt and the other nations, and their plan was complete extermination of the Jews. They took the side of Hitler during World War II. They lost the war, and the practice and the policy of all those nations is to kill individual civilians, whereas Israel does the opposite. It only attacks military targets. Now, in any attack, civilians do die, and that's always a tragedy and always an atrocity, but it's not deliberate. And they're unique in that sense. And I just want to go through a little bit of the history of Israel, because Israel, for many of you who don't know the history, first of all, the Jews have been there for 3,700 years. The term Palestine was actually invented by the Romans when they were trying to exterminate the Jews and move them out. They named Judea after the Jews' enemies, the Philistines. But it was part of the Ottoman Empire. Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire, and the Palestinians during World War I fought against the Allied forces, so they were on the losing side. And at the end of the war, the Ottoman Empire was dismantled, and the League of Nations and Woodrow Wilson said, "Here's what we're going to do: we're going to take apart the Ottoman Empire, and we're going to give the ownership of those countries to the indigenous people who lived in the country." Well, Palestine was a large area. It's called the British Mandate. And more than half the people who lived there were Jews. I think it was about 600,000. I think there were about 500,000 Palestinians. I could be wrong about those numbers, and they're probably disputed. Despite that fact, so there were two groups that were due to get land. And 4/5 of the land, because of bigotry against the Jews, 4/5 of that land was given to the Palestinians. It's now called Jordan. And 1/5, a tiny little sliver of traditional land, was given to the Jews. And then there was a series of wars. In 48, Israel became a state. All the nations around it attacked it, and some of them took chunks away. The Gaza Strip was taken. The Judea and Samaria, the West Banks, were taken by Jordan, and the Temple Mount was also taken by Jordan. And Israel lived without those for many years, and then those countries all attacked Israel again with an unprovoked attack in 1967. I remember sitting with my father on the patio beside our swimming pool when he got a call from the White House, and somebody on that phone told him that Syria and Egypt had just attacked Israel, and Jordan would soon join it. Israel said to Jordan, "Please don't attack us, and we won't touch your land. We won't attack you." Jordan attacked anyway. And as a result of that, I remember I said to my father, "How can Israel survive?" Because the land owned by the Arabs is 600 times the land owned by Israel. It's a tiny, tiny little sliver, 20 miles across. I said, "How can they survive with all these giant nations attacking them?" And he said to me, "The Israelis are tough," which was the highest accolade that he could give anybody. So I understood his admiration for them. The Israelis won that war by a miracle, and they took back the Temple Mount, which was theirs. It was their part of the mandate. They took the West Bank, and they took the Gaza Strip, and they gave the Golan Heights. And then the UN resolution And the Israel government said, we will give those lands all back to the countries from which they took, even though we won them fairly in a war, even though they are part of our historical lands, we will trade land for peace. If you promise that you won't attack us anymore, we will give you back that land. And Egypt agreed and got the Golan Heights back. And Syria. Got the Sinai, and Syria agreed and got the Golan Heights. But Jordan wouldn't agree. So,
Egypt got Sinai and
right. And again and again, the Israelis have negotiated with the Palestinians at Camp David, and again and again, the Israelis have offered to make giant concessions and give back all the land if there would be peace. And every time the Palestinians refused, Prince Bandar, who was at Camp David and who was from Saudi Arabia, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, who was the referee at Camp David, that it was 100% the fault of Yasser Arafat. They would not take they would not take the most generous concessions. And that brings us to where we are today, which is that young Palestinians are being taught to murder Jews in the schools. And some 80% of the Palestinian people, when they're polled in poll after poll, says that it is okay to murder Jews, individual Jews. That Israel has no right to exist, and that ultimately it must be destroyed.
So, just going to leave that there. I should point out that version of the history that Kennedy just outlined is hotly disputed by the other side. And here on Strange Bedfellows, we disagree sometimes, but we aren't disagreeable. So who would like to take that apart? Anybody wants to take that apart? Any disagreements there, guys? I bet you do have some disagreements with what he just said. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think one of Kennedy's flaws is that he thinks like a lawyer. And normally that would be a good thing. Well, no, excuse me, I take that back. It's not a good thing to always think like a lawyer, because lawyers are never really in pursuit of truth, but rather what wins their case. You know what I'm saying? So
good point. When
he's talking, whether it's the history of Israel or whether it's the vaccines or the environmentalism stuff, sometimes he's on point and sometimes he's not, right? And like you said, the version that he said about the history of Israel is hotly contested, but he's trying to make a point here. He's not actually trying to come to the conclusion of truth. If he actually wanted to get to the bottom of this, I would be really, Max Blumenthal keeps saying, come on my show and discuss it. Why not have a panel? Many times. Yeah, right. Why not have a panel where Robert F. Kennedy's in the middle, right? Maybe he's moderating, or he gets another moderator, and then he gets, Max Blumenthal and someone else to be arguing over, and then on the other side you get, you get Rabbi Shmuley and get our friends over, Mark Gruber over at Untold Stories of America. They're good people. I like them. I think they're honest. They're very pro-Israeli, and they came on my show on Declaring Independence. And they were like hardcore, like, yeah, man, Israel deserves the right to exist. And if the Palestinians put their weapons down, there'd be peace in the Middle East. And if the Israelis put their weapons down, the Palestinians would murder every single Jew. And like, it made me realize how unsharpened my axe was when it comes to Israel and understanding the conflict. I know Kynan has looked a lot into actually the creation of Israel and how the British divided up the land and divvied it up so that there would be conflict, there would be tension, right? So from the start, it was rigged.
From the start in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, yes.
Right.
Yeah, so I would just say, sometimes Kennedy likes to assume he already knows things and thinks he has it solid. I've heard him go on the record say, I'm like a lawyer, right? I know the points that bit by bit by bit. But that's not how you pursue truth. That's how you win your case. That's just rhetoric right there. And you could win a case sometimes and it can become totally false, In fact, the first thing a lawyer will tell you is that sometimes telling the truth may not be compelling enough for a jury. You got to really play up what happened, your side, in order to really get the jury on your truth. But Kynan actually knows more about the history.
Yeah. Well,
that's a great point, by the way. He was arguing that case like he was in a courtroom here this week. And, you know, Kennedy doesn't lose when he goes to court. If he goes to trial, he usually wins. He's very, very persuasive in front of a jury. And he did argue that like an attorney for Israel. Anyway, go ahead, Kynan.
I wish he lost at the Indian Point nuclear power plant shutting down. What a terrible.
Yeah, that hasn't worked out too well, has it?
Anyway,
No.
sorry. Go ahead, Kynan.
Yeah, sure. Well, I would just say I don't think RFK is intentionally being dishonest, and I don't think he goes into a speech or a forum without studying the issue beforehand. But like Jose said, it's, you know, he has these very lawyerly tactics, you know, and that works to his disadvantage at some points. But understanding Israel, I think the British role is absolutely crucial. You already mentioned the Balfour Declaration, where you know, there were spheres of influence created between the French, the British, and other colonial powers. And you really had this situation where, you know, different cultures, different regions would be fighting each other. And that's the British playbook. And, you know, another analogy to that is Brzezinski and the Arc of Crisis, what he did when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan and arming, you know, the Mujahideen with Stinger missiles. And we're still seeing the repercussions of that today. And many of those Mujahideen, they later went on to form Al-Qaeda. And we saw what that was. So, and also, I mean, just particular things like, you know, Hamas fighters or Palestinians being paid to kill Jews. I mean, that's just, that's been refuted. You know, that's a terrible thing to say. And there are figures, you know, Amnesty International, the United Nations, which have clearly outlined the fact that there have been way more civilian casualties on the Palestinian side than there have been on the Israeli side. So I think it's a very tragic situation. I don't think you need to be pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, or on any particular side to see a resolution to this crisis, but both sides need to start talking. And that almost did happen with Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat with the Oslo Accords. They were going to talk. And Rabin had recognized that, but unfortunately he was assassinated.
He was assassinated. Yes, 1995.
Yeah. So we still see this tragedy playing out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think that was a hit job by the Mossad. You know what's interesting, guys? Remember John F. Kennedy Jr., Bobby's cousin, President Kennedy's son, who died in a plane crash in 1999? He published a magazine back in the 90s called George. And shortly before Rabin was assassinated, he had done this big interview with Rabin on this very situation. And then George also did a pretty explosive investigation after the Rabin assassination, showing some very strong evidence that this was a Mossad hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if obviously you guys probably aren't old enough to remember George magazine, but I just thought I'd throw that out there because it's interesting. You know, John was Bobby's closest cousin. Those two were very, very close and probably talked about a lot of politics between themselves. But, you know, one of the things that disturbs me, I mean, besides the fact that Rabbi Shmuley is just rude, I mean, there are some really, when you watch this event, he's got such a rude and brusque and loud way about him that I've just never really cared for the guy personally. But what concerns me about Rabbi Shmuley cozying up to Bobby, I mean, Bobby's welcome to his views on Israel. If that's his sincerely held belief, then I respect that. But when I see guys like Rabbi Shmuley, who's been a race baiter, he's every bit as bad as Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson in my book, and his whole thing for years has been cozying up to celebrities. Usually the way he does that is by raising money for their favorite charities. That's how he got close to Michael Jackson. And remember, he was out there defending Michael Jackson against the charges that he was molesting children, saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Michael would never do such a thing." Right? Rabbi Shmuley has an interesting track record, but also he's very open about how much he is close to the Mossad. And in fact, I posted a picture today on my Twitter that Rabbi Shmuley posted a couple of years ago. There he was standing there with the head of the Mossad. I don't know if you guys have seen that photo, but that'll get your attention. In the JFK assassination research community, there are many who believe that the Mossad and Israel played a key role in the assassination of President Kennedy and his father, Robert Kennedy. So I don't know if Kennedy's looked into that, if Bobby is aware of that. I think he's been getting his history from one side, probably all of his life. But I can tell you this, I know he is persuadable, even though he's old, but he's not set in his ways like a lot of old people are. I mean, I have seen him personally. I helped to change his mind on the assassination of his father, for example. I put him in touch with Paul Schrade, who was a victim that night in the Ambassador Hotel. Paul Schrade was a labor organizer on Robert Kennedy's campaign. And when the shots rang out in the Ambassador Hotel kitchen, Paul took a bullet right in the middle of his forehead. And he survived, and he spent the rest of his life trying to get down to the truth and the bottom of what really happened that night in the Ambassador Hotel kitchen. He came to the conclusion, the obvious conclusion, based on the forensics, the sound recordings that we have, that there's no way that Sirhan could have fired the shot that hit him or that hit Senator Kennedy, because Sirhan was standing 3 feet in front of Senator Kennedy. And of course, the shot that hit Kennedy was in the ear. Thomas Noguchi, the coroner, concluded that that shot was fired from less than 1 inch away from his ear from this direction. So there's absolutely no way that that could have been even possible. And that the whole narrative about Sirhan being a disgruntled Palestinian who was upset about the 6-day war, that was all bunk. And we've actually had, Rick and I recently did an interview with Lisa Pease, who's the author of a great book about the RFK assassination. The book is called A Lie Too Big to Fail. And she makes a very compelling case that Bobby Kennedy Jr. has read, and that helped convince him. All of his life, he and his entire family grew up believing that Sirhan was guilty. They believed the narrative that he was a disgruntled, angry Palestinian, pissed off about Israel, who decided to shoot Bobby Kennedy because of his support for sending more money and more weapons to Israel. So, I know that he is persuadable. That's one thing I can say about Bobby Kennedy. He is an honest man of integrity. I don't believe anybody's putting words in his mouth. I think that these beliefs are sincerely held. I just believe that he's only been getting one side of the history.
I think he's a politician. And I think
well, that's right.
I think he is there because he has been accused of being anti-Semitic. He needs some damage control. So what do? His campaign team says, you're in trouble here because you're being accused of being an anti-Semite. Gonna have to change the optics on this. So roll out the interview with the rabbi, and then in he goes. And see how I love Israel and I love Jewish people. I'm not an anti-Semite. In fact, let me just go the extra mile. And here's all the rhetoric that you're looking for to prove that I'm not an anti-Semite. And then that's really what's going on here. So whether he really believes what he's saying or not, I could not tell you, but I do know this: RFK Jr., any way you slice it, I mean, he's a nice guy and I like a lot of what he says, but he is a politician. And that you're watching politics on display right there. That's what that is. And that's what you do when you're running for president. That is political pragmatism.
I just, I think you're right. But if you're getting accused of being anti-Semitic, what can you really do? It's a smear. There was no basis for it. It's a smear. my opinion, put out a statement. No, I'm not anti-Semitic. I stand with my family's tradition of supporting Israel. Move on.
And leave it at that.
And yeah, just never bring it up again. Instead, what does he do?
Can't
No,
do
I have
that
to
when
go
you're
on
running
a.
for president, not when you're sitting there at that censorship hearing and it's done in such a huge public way and they went out of their way to hammer him on that. And it's not the first time and they keep coming back to it. It's the same thing with Trump. When they were accusing him of being racist, what did he do? I don't remember what the event was, but he went to some place where he was a black community and he had and it was like he surrounded himself with a bunch of black people. It's like, here's all my black friends. See, I'm not racist. That's what you do.
That's what politicians always do.
That's what they do. Give me a black baby to kiss and I'll prove it. You know, it's
That's
like
right.
That's what Trump did. That's what Kennedy just did. So I mean, guys,
it's my Jewish friend, the rabbi.
Now,
see,
now we're sitting here talking about the Israel and Palestine. It's not that complicated. He just wants to go up in the polls, so he had to go talk to a rabbi. That's it.
Yeah, and the strange thing, Rick, is that it seems to be having a backfiring effect, especially among the Democrats that he's trying to win over.
Yeah, you can't win, man, because it's like now, you see, a big part of his base is sort of pro-Palestinian.
Right.
It truly is.
Yep.
He
needs that other larger voting bloc, which is the majority, not over here. So he also understands that, as you guys have just illustrated, you've just proven it for him. You don't agree with him on this issue, but you're still supporting him. And because why? You don't like any of the other options. So he just plays the politics and he goes and talks to the rabbi and tells the American public what he thinks they want to hear, at least what the mainstream media and the DNC machine wants to hear. That's what he's doing. That's
but maybe
all
not.
Is.
You know what's interesting? This very week, as all of this controversy around Kennedy was unfolding, the Biden administration did a big pivot on the Israel-Palestine question. Away from Israel, which has traditionally been such a strong ally of the Democratic Party, because in more recent years, we see a growing movement. The Democratic Party is changing, and the position on, starting to sway more towards support of Palestine. And that's an interesting pivot from the Biden administration at the same time that Bobby's taking such a strong stand on Israel.
It just depends on how your campaign team is reading the polls and the public and what you think your messaging needs to be. So they're doing their polling and their research, and they're just trying to figure it out. And pretty soon they'll be down there kissing black babies too. And name your ethnic group or your identity politics, and just that's what it is, man. It's just politics.
You've been around long enough to know, Rick Walker. You've covered a lot of campaigns, and so have I, and we're both kind of cynical.
Jaded.
Yeah, we're a little jaded about this. And yet here I am working on the Kennedy campaign, and I'm trying to tell people as a volunteer recruiter, he's not just another politician. He's not like all the others. That's the case I'm trying to make to people. And boy, I've had my work cut out for me this week. For that very reason that you just outlined, Rick.
That's what they said about Trump when he ran. And, as soon as you declare your candidacy, you're a politician.
Yes.
You have to play the game. It's just the way it is. So.
That's true. That's true. And Bobby's new at this. Even though he's been around politics all his life, he's never filed to run for any political office ever. And it's different when the shoe's on your foot. You can no longer stay above the fray.
You're like the worst cheerleader for RFK Jr. You're like saying,
yep, that's why the campaign will not
if he wants
give
to
me a
win,
salary.
He needs to get better video. That video is all washed out. Like, what is that?
It looked terrible, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
And the video was all like clipped up on YouTube. They had all kinds of technical issues, just like every time Kennedy does a live stream, Rick. Don't we know about that here at Maverick News? I don't know what's going on over there at Team Kennedy, but they sure need a new web team. I don't think they know how to live stream. It's been a mess, a hot mess. But I do want to show you one more clip from this event. I want to show you Kynan's question, because Kynan had the opportunity to ask a really great question, and Kennedy gave him a really great answer. So
just before you run that, I need to jump off. Might be back on at the end, but I need to step away. But guys, if I don't make it back, thank you very much for what you're doing, and it's great to meet both of you. Hopefully, I'll get back before the end of the broadcast, but I do need to step away. It's been a pleasure.
Yep, got to go walk Cosmo.
That's right. Okay.
All right, we'll see you in a bit, Rick.
Thank you.
So, like I said, this meeting got kind of loud and acrimonious at times, and just before Kynan gets up and asks a wonderful question, things were really heated in the room. Can you guys explain what happened just before Kynan asked his question?
Oh, yeah, I can explain that. Well, our friend, Janet, who also did an intervention, she had...
a very effective one, by the way. It was a very good intervention she did. I think it was the best you could do in those circumstances.
Yeah, but she had directly, confronted Shmuley on his lies, on his, whitewashing of Israeli crimes, and she brought something I thought was really relevant that didn't show that, went against the narrative that Israel is not an apartheid state. They're not committing these crimes against Palestinians. And she brought up the case of, Jose, you know the name of...
Shireen Abu Akleh.
Right. She brought up...
Yes, the Al Jazeera reporter.
Yes.
Right. She brought up his case and her case.
Her case.
And how she was murdered by the IDF, and Shmuley, wouldn't let Kennedy respond to it. He tried to derail it. Yeah, he took the question.
Well, I'll show you. I just queued it up. So we'll show her question and show you what happened, because the room just exploded over that one. And then your question is right after her question, so that we'll kind of get the context of what was happening in the room when you got up and kind of cooled the tensions. Your question was perfectly timed, because things get really heated here. Take a look.
And we saw that, and that's why it's really important. And now, we have this entire retinue of new technologies, these frightening new surveillance technologies like AI, which our children are going to, have to deal with GPS, with facial recognition systems, with these low altitude, 415,000 low altitude satellites that have now, been given permits. And devices that can listen to you all day. So your devices are listening to you, harvesting your information when you cough, when you sneeze, when you mention a new pair of boots or a mattress and you get the ad. They're listening to you, and they are harvesting their data and selling it. But also governments can do that as well. So we have this new kind of turnkey totalitarianism that is waiting there for the first tyrannical impulse to get up and take advantage of it. And that's why it's so important right now that we build up the barricades of our own Bill of Rights and our own democratic systems and protect those and fortify them, because the wave of intrusive, of weaponized technology for totalitarian states is coming at us, and we need to be strong.
The COVID-19 vaccines are beyond the particular discussion we're having tonight, but I should say, because I'm sure it will come up, that the first time I met Bobby, I said to him, not only that I was quintuple vaxxed, as I said earlier, but I also told him that the World Values Network has a giant gala that we do every year at Carnegie Hall. And I want to acknowledge Gabe Bella's here, and where's Julie Bernstein, who helped, the main organizer of tonight. Thank you, Julie, wherever you are. God bless you. Came all the way from Miami to organize tonight. And Stephanie from Kennedy team, Stephanie Spear, God bless you, Stephanie, and all the people who are Bobby's team. We're very devoted to him. But I told Bobby that we honored Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, for developing the vaccines. That's the first thing I said to him. And I said,
Boo, they booed. They booed.
Way to make myself popular, like a good Jewish boy. Okay, and I said that Albert Bourla, as a child of survivors, his family was annihilated in Thessalonica in Greece, the only city on earth to have experienced 97% annihilation of their Jewish community, and his father survived. And I said that you had developed the vaccines and saved many lives. Bobby did not do what you just did. He didn't boo me. He may have disagreed with me, but you know what makes his campaign unique, and I'm calling on President Trump and President Biden and DeSantis and Nikki, everybody, to emulate his lead. You can actually disagree with Bobby and still have a strong intellectual bond and a strong and deep friendship. You don't have to choose every single side. That's a brain-dead America that none of us should endorse. A brain is not a liability. Okay, the next question, please. Well, you know what? There are most Orthodox Jews in America will probably agree with Bobby. I'll say they were very religious. They were anti-vax. I'm pro-vaccine. But you know what? Why can't we just talk without booing each other? I just don't get it. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Yes. First of all, I would like to thank you for your position on mandates. As a Jewish woman who cares for justice, I do have a question. It's been about a year since U.S. citizen and journalist Shireen Abu Ablaka was shot by the IDF. It is known through both video and forensic science that it was definitely the IDF and that they targeted her. Are you willing to commit to calling for Israel to extradite the soldier to the U.S. with body cam for a public U.S. trial? She is a U.S. citizen and justice should be served. Also,
no, wait.
Let me finish.
Let you say your second part.
Don't speak over me,
No,
sir.
let's just do one question at a time.
Sir, please let me finish. Also, please,
if you make it quick,
can you also commit to having a conversation one-on-one with Jewish Voice for Peace?
Okay, just one second, just a second. Come on. Wait. Let's be civil about this. What's your name, please?
My name is Janet Clark.
What is it?
Janet Clark Goodman.
Janet, thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Israel is a open democracy with a free press.
I didn't ask you, by the way.
No, excuse me. Well, you know what? Bobby will answer in a second. But I am going to correct misinformation. The IDF has now admitted that this renowned Palestinian journalist probably did die from an Israeli bullet during a shootout against terrorists. She was there covering it. What you said that she was deliberately targeted is an absolute lie. Now, what is the source?
She was definitely targeted.
No.
She had a helmet on.
Wait.
She had a helmet on and she had armor.
She has covered.
There is no way.
She covered dozens
of
military.
No way.
Wait.
You took a direct shot.
No. She covered dozens of military. She covered dozens of military raids. Why did they wait to target her?
It took a direct shot.
They were what?
It took a direct shot to get her between the helmet and the armor.
What is your source for this?
What my source? My source is forensics and the video.
You have no source.
And the video.
So Israel conducted a lengthy investigation about this, which is what they do always. And amazingly, they admitted it probably was an Israeli bullet. And unfortunately, there are journalists who die in war zones. It is tragic.
This is a typical
blood libel.
I am Jewish. Do not tell me that. Mr. Kennedy,
no truth to this.
Please don't you believe that the U.S. should be able to adjudicate this? She was a U.S. citizen. She was also a journalist. And again, do you also commit to sitting down with the Jewish Voice for Peace and having a conversation with them, or do those Jewish voices not count? Yes, they do. Thank you.
Okay, enough. Let him respond, then we're going to move on. Go ahead.
I don't know enough about the case to make a judgment about, extradition, and I don't know if we even have an extradition treaty for that particular crime, or what the basis of it would be in Israel or Palestine or wherever the killing took place. I just couldn't answer your question.
Thank you.
Israel,
No, you
Israel
cannot
is
dominate
ours,
the evening. The
they
next
should be
question,
willing.
please. You're
Do
not
you
going to
agree?
dominate the evening.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Hi.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Kennedy.
Save us, Kynan.
My
Save us.
question is on the topic of nuclear war, which you've addressed very well in your commencement address, which I think was one of the most important speeches given by a candidate. I'm personally an organizer for an organization called the International Peace Coalition. We've been organizing peace organizations across the world to really unite against this threat of nuclear war, and we really have to bridge the gap, as you said, because it no longer matters what our ideologies may be, what our particular beliefs are. Humanity is on the brink of annihilation, and we need to unite on that matter. No matter what.
But we need a question, please.
I'm getting to it. Thank you. But because Kennedy, you talked about his American University speech, I think is probably one of the most important speeches. We need a peace that's not for the grave, but a peace where all our families, everyone can cherish. And I want you to talk about that, and I really want you to endorse what we're doing with this peace coalition. And Helga Zepp-LaRue, she was the one who organized this.
We need a question, please.
She's calling for a durable security architecture among all the nations of the world. So I would like you to endorse that, and I'd like you to talk about the American University speech.
Well, first of all, I love what you said. Thank you for everything that you said, and thank you for advocating for that, because it's so critical right now. I mean, we're in a potentially existential battle with Russia. I mean, the U.S. is now is effectively at war with Russia. It's a nuclear power, and they have 1,000 more nuclear weapons than we do, and nobody seems to be caring about this. So I love what you said. My uncle, in that speech, which I agree was one of the most important speeches in American history, he had negotiated secretly a nuclear test ban treaty with Khrushchev. My uncle and Khrushchev had developed this extraordinary friendship with each other, where they could talk to each other on a hotline. Their State Department, their intelligence apparatus all wanted to go to war, but both of them had been to war. And Khrushchev had been at Stalingrad. The last thing he wanted was to go to war. And he recognized that he was a partner with my uncle. They wrote each other 26 secret letters. The first one was smuggled to, we had a Soviet spy who used to visit our house when I was a little boy. His name is Georgy Bolshakov. And he was and we loved him. The kid, me and my 10 brothers and sisters, he would play with us. He would do Cossack dancing. He would climb ropes with my dad and do push-up contests. And he's a very charming guy. And it was cool for us because we knew he was a KGB spy and a GRU spy. And this was at a time when all the James Bond films were coming out. So it was cool having a spy in our house. But my uncle Khrushchev knew he couldn't trust the people, his military apparatus, and my uncle knew that he couldn't trust his. They began corresponding with each other, hiding their letters in the New York Times, which Georgy Bolshakov would fly back and forth from Moscow and give them. And they devised a plan to create the first nuclear weapons treaty of the nuclear age, which was a nuclear test ban treaty. And when my uncle and they negotiated it secretly, they kept the State Department, the CIA out of it, and when they got the treaty, the U.S. sympathy for that treaty was 80 to 20 against it. And the military was in rebellion against my uncle. The Senate and House, even the Democrats were all against it. And that speech was the beginning of turning the tide. And what he said something extraordinary to the American people. Because we had all been raised with this idea that we had won the war. You know, it was America who beat Hitler. And, you know, we were watching shows like Vic Morrow and Combat on TV that showed Americans beating the Nazis and winning the war. And my uncle said, no, it was the Russians who won the war. The Russians, 1 out of every 7 Russians was killed. Hitler leveled a third of the country. He said, imagine if every city was reduced to rubble, every forest, every field burned, every forest burned between the East Coast and Chicago. That's what happened to Russia. And he said, we need to put ourselves into their shoes. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of our adversary. And it was the first time Americans had heard that, and they started thinking differently about it. And that 2 months later, that treaty passed. And, you know, I think it's important to think of today because nobody has talked to Putin for a year. We have no high-level relationship with Russia. We need to be talking to them. We need to do what my uncle said, which is to put ourselves in the shoes of our adversaries.
Very good.
Okay,
Very.
Yeah. Kynan?
Uh-oh. You had more to say. I'm sorry. I cut the video too soon.
No. That was it. Pretty much.
Did you get to say, it sounded like you were going to say something else. Were you going to say something else to Bobby, or was that it?
Oh, I don't hear Kynan.
I think you might be muted.
Maybe you got to refresh your StreamYard or something.
You might try that. Got your headphones on?
Hello, kitty.
My cat is very interested to hear what Kynan has to say.
Hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great.
All good.
That's probably because I took off my AirPods. Okay. Well, I did have something to say. Well, I just wanted to say thank you for the wonderful response, Mr. Kennedy. And I wanted to tell him that I think all of your supporters, all your volunteers should be circulating that speech, especially in the American University speech, especially in the lead up to August 6th, which I also wanted to tell him about. Fortunately, Shmuley, you know, not the greatest of moderators, so I couldn't get my 2 cents in afterwards.
It's terrible. Terrible moderator. Just talking over everybody, including the candidate. I just wanted to tell him, shut up. You're not the guy running for president. Let the candidate answer the damn question. Jeez. No, I loved your question. I could tell Mr. Kennedy did too. You know, you spoke the right language to him, a language he understands, and that's the language of peace. Right. Which is kind of where I wanted to steer our conversation as we wind the show to a close, is what you guys have planned for next weekend in New York City. Tell us about the Humanity for Peace rally.
Sure. Well, I'll start, Jose. You can add some things. But yeah, I mean, this peace rally has been organized by Anastasia Battle, a proud member of the Schiller Institute and an awesome organizer,
and you know
great
what?
friend of mine.
She's going to be our guest on Maverick News next Friday night to talk about the rally. And we're going to have Anastasia Battle on the show. I love her, and she's going to be with us on the show next week.
She's awesome. But yeah, I mean, this came out of what I had mentioned in my question, the International Peace Coalition. We meet every Friday at 10 Eastern Time. And, you know, there have been several peace organizations that have been on. Jack Gilroy with Pax Christi, Ray McGovern, you know, many people that we've intersected who, of course, are not going to agree with everything we've said that we believe in. There have been some disagreements regarding Lyndon LaRouche's policy. There was one on the SDI, for example. But, you know, we're united in the sense that we all want peace. We know the war in Ukraine has gone way too far. We spent way too much money, and now we're sending cluster bombs there, which is just going to get more people killed, more civilians killed. So we're not doing this on behalf of Ukraine. It's clear now that we're not doing that. So we need a concerted effort to bring peace. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the West, in the United States, aren't aware of the threat of nuclear war. So we're holding this rally on August 6th. Like I said, it's going to be on the 78th anniversary of the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we're going to have many speakers there. Scott Ritter, who's a great friend of yours, he'll be speaking. Yeah. Garland Nixon, I believe, will be there.
Yeah, I just heard Garland was added to the lineup. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jose Vega, he'll be speaking there. You all know him. Yeah, it will be going on from 1 to 4 o'clock in front of UN Plaza. And afterwards, we will have a concert, Mozart's Requiem, to kind of memorialize the victims, you know, a very appropriate piece. And we'll have some other selections. That'll be from 6 to 8. It'll be free to anyone on a first come, first served basis. So, yeah.
I think it's beautiful what you guys are doing with the concert. You know, the Mozart Requiem is an amazing piece of music. And that's one of the cool things about LaRouche and the LaRouche movement. There was, as you were explaining earlier in the show, there's always a lot of classical music and art involved in LaRouche events, you know. I'm not sure why that is, but it was always an important part of that. So I love that you're doing the Mozart Requiem. That's absolutely perfect. And I wanted to show people the poster. This event is this next Sunday? That's August the 6th, right?
Yeah, next Sunday. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 1 to 4 p.m., Dash Hammarskjöld Plaza. That's on East 47th at 2nd Avenue in New York. And, you know, we do have a lot of American viewers as well as Canadian viewers. And that's not too far of a drive for some of our Canadian viewers who might want to attend. I couldn't think of anything more important at this moment in our history. This is something that's so, so important. And you're right. Most average Americans and probably Canadians too, walking around out there, going about their daily lives, they don't realize that this is our hour of maximum danger. You know, in President Kennedy's inaugural address, he talked about the hour of maximum danger. And it was true then. In 1961, it was a very tense moment in the Cold War, as we found out 1 year later when we had a Cuban Missile Crisis and a nuclear standoff with the Soviet Union. I actually believe that we are in an even greater hour of maximum danger right now than we were in 1961, 1962. And that's one of the reasons why I so strongly support Kennedy. I think we need a guy like him to do what his uncle did. Like he just said in that video clip, to talk to Russia, to actually talk to Putin. He said, we have not had a conversation with Putin. None of our leaders have in years. I think the last leader to talk to Putin was probably Donald Trump.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
And,
yeah.
you know, and Trump says he'll talk to Putin too. But here's the question I have, guys. And this is what kind of upsets me. And I wanted to just yell at the screen when Bobby said that, because I'm like, you're right. You do need to talk to Putin. What are you waiting for, man? Why not just pick up the phone? Oh, how about now? Why do you have to wait until you're president of the United States to have that conversation? You really don't. You could set up a Zoom meeting with him this week. Same for you, Trump.
Well, that's what Trump tried to do, or at least that's what Michael Flynn tried to do, and then they put him in. You know,
right.
Then they cited the Logan Act on him, and you know, this is Kennedy. They're gonna scrutinize the hell out of him. So that's one argument as to why. I mean, I hear you, and I would agree with you, but you know, I think you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, because we live in such a surveillance society that there's no way, unlike 1962 and 63, when Kennedy was negotiating the nuclear test ban treaty with Khrushchev, that was all done on the down low, direct. They had a phone line installed direct to the Kremlin and vice versa, where the State Department was cut out of the negotiations. And I'm not so sure that I don't think they were able to listen in on those calls. So it was truly a back channel on the down low kind of conversation. I don't think that's possible in this day and age, guys. I mean, the NSA knows every phone call we make, every text we send. Is there any such thing anymore as a secure phone line? Could Kennedy or Trump pick up the phone and actually give Putin a call in secret?
I don't. Well, well, Jose, you might have some thoughts, but I personally don't think so, quite honestly, given what, we've worked with Bill Binney. He says essentially every phone call, every email that goes in and out is tapped. And, given the hot personality that RFK Jr. is, if he were to make that step, I mean, he'd get all kinds of backlash. He'd probably be charged with treason. So I don't think he would be able to do something like that. But I think the way to resolve that is to get the citizenry behind RFK Jr., behind Trump, or whoever, frankly, is just calling for negotiations. This election is quite frankly going to be very interesting. We haven't had an election like this in a long time that, you have two figures that are actually serious. They're honest, despite their flaws. But it's going to be contentious. There's going to be all kinds of things thrown at them. But we need to involve the citizenry, reactivate the citizenry. And that's what this rally is going to do. And I hope RFK Jr. can attend.
I hope he can too. I don't know his travel plans next weekend, but if he's in the New York area, I sure hope that he would show up and take part. I know that myself and Scott Ritter and a few other friends have kind of put a bug in his ear about it. So let's hope that he can make it. And I think we're about to put Jose to sleep. We're almost done, Jose. Hang in there.
I've been yawning the last 10 minutes. I've been dying. We've been out all day.
Yeah, it's been a long day out there in the heat, leafleting.
That's right. Old school organizing.
Yeah. Well, you're so good at that. It's one of the things I really respect about you and Kynan is what great organizers you are. And I love what you're doing with this rally next weekend. What's the website? Where can people learn more?
Humanityforpeace.net.
.net. Okay. Humanityforpeace.net, not .com.
.net.
Well, I encourage people to go take a look at that. If you know somebody in New York who's on board with stopping nuclear war and preventing another Hiroshima, preventing another Nagasaki, remember, only one nation in the history of the world has ever actually dropped a nuclear weapon twice, and it was us. Yeah. So everyone says, oh, watch out for Putin. He's going to nuke us all. I'm just saying, if things kick off, I don't think it's going to be Putin starting it, folks. We have a history of this,
That's right. Yes.
So, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending your Saturday night with me. It's always a pleasure to talk to both of you. I just love you guys. And kudos to you for, confronting Mr. Kennedy this week. I think that's healthy. I mean, I work with the campaign and I love Kennedy and I want him to win. But I also feel very strongly that we must keep him honest and that he is just as, he's fair game for a challenge, just like any politician is now. He's in this race and he expects it as long as the attacks are fair. And you guys didn't even attack him. You were just fair. You asked fair questions. And these are questions that he should expect. And they were good faith questions, unlike the attacks we've seen on Kennedy the last couple of weeks since his House testimony, where there have been so many just lies and slanders and defamations. Those aren't good faith challenges. What you guys did was a good faith challenge, and I support you and salute you for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And guys, I will see you again very, very soon. Peace. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Thank you so much, Lori. I
This
really
has been a
appreciate
Maverick
it.
Multimedia production.